Welcome back to 11 After 9. I'm Derek, and this channel exists to give you honest, down-to-earth advice about buying and owning these cars. No spin, just straight talk from someone who owns them and drives them and deals with them every single day. Here's the question I get asked constantly, in my inbox, in my comments, from people I work with one-on-one. Derek, with everything going on right now, is it still a good time to buy a Porsche? And my honest answer is always the same. It depends entirely on which Porsche you're talking about. Because here's the thing that nobody tells you. The Porsche market isn't one market. It's a dozen overlapping markets all moving at different speeds in different directions. And right now, in any economy, in any market condition, there are three specific cars sitting at an intersection that I think represent some of the best value propositions in all of Porsche ownership. Not because they're cheap, but because the window to buy them at the right price is open right now, and a window like this does not stay open forever. So listen, before we get into the cars, I want to give you the framework that I think about when we talk about this subject. Mainly because it applies to every generation of Porsche, and once you understand it, you'll be able to spot these windows yourself. Think about the cars you lusted after when you were young, the poster on the wall, the ones you'd stare at in traffic when you were 16 years old, and thought you'd never own one. Now think about where those people are today. Mid-career, some disposable income, finally in a position to act on that feeling they've been carrying around for 25 years. That is the single most powerful force in the classic car market. Generational nostalgia with a paycheck behind it. The cars that were on teenagers' walls in the late 1990s and early 2000s are entering that window right now. The 996, the early 997, the first generation Boxster. These cars are about 20 to 25 years old, and the generation that grew up wanting them is just starting to be in a financial position to go get them. The smart money moves before that wave fully arrives. That's what today is about. So let's talk about the 996, what I consider to be the most misunderstood 911 in Porsche history. If you were shopping for a used 911 10 years ago, someone probably told you to avoid the 996 like the plague, the IMS bearing, the intermediate shaft, the catastrophic engine failure story that haunted every forum thread and scared away an entire generation of buyers. Here's what those forum threads didn't tell you. The actual failure rate of IMS bearings, it was severely overblown. Porsche specialists who have assessed thousands of these cars consistently report that the assumed failure rates were never close to what the internet suggested. The horror stories were real, but they were far from universal. And here's the practical reality today. The vast majority of 996s still on the road either have never had that issue or already had the bearing upgraded by a previous owner who did their homework. The fear was disproportionate to the actual risk, and that fear kept prices artificially depressed for over a decade, which is exactly why the opportunity exists now. The 996 was Porsche's first water-cooled 911. It launched in 1998, and it was controversial at the time. The fried egg headlights, the shared parts bin with the Boxster, the departure from the air-cooled formula that defined the brand. Purists were furious. The press was definitely divided, and for years the 996 carried that baggage with it. But something interesting has been happening in the last few years. The enthusiast community has been quietly, steadily reassessing the 996. The headlights that everyone hated, they're starting to look like a period design rather than a mistake, the same way the 928 went from unloved to an icon. The shared parts criticism, it gave the 996 a parts availability story that's actually quite good compared to the older air-cooled cars. And the driving experience, which was always excellent, has not changed. It's the same honest analog 911 it always was. The reputation is being rehabilitated in real time, and the market is starting to notice. Now, what do you give up with a 996? I want to be straight with you here. You give up the collector cachet of the air-cooled cars. You give up the refinement of the 997 and beyond. The interior is showing its age. It was a product of its time, and it's starting to feel like it. And yes, you still need to do your homework on the engine. A pre-purchase inspection and a bore scope are not optional. They are the price of admission. But here's where I land on the 996. For the buyer who wants a genuine 911 driving experience, rear engine, manual, naturally aspirated flat six, at a price point that is still reasonable, and who is buying it because they actually want to drive it rather than park it in a collection, the 996 remains one of the most honest value propositions in the entire Porsche lineup. This is a slow burn. It's not going to double in value overnight, but the floor is in. The rehabilitation is real, and the generational wave I described is heading directly toward this car. Buying ahead of that wave is the move. The next car I want to share with you is a 997.1. There's a value gap here that just doesn't make sense. This one genuinely puzzles me. And I mean that in the best possible way. Because when something in the Porsche market doesn't make logical sense, it usually means there's an opportunity hiding inside that confusion. The 997.1 and the 997.2 are separated by a model update in 2009. From the outside, they look very close to being identical, and the driving experience is exceptional in both. The 997 generation as a whole is widely regarded as one of the greatest 911s Porsche ever made, the sweet spot between analog character and modern capability. And yet right now, today, you can find a clean 997.1 for anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 less than a comparable 997.2, sometimes even more, and for what is essentially the same car in many respects. That gap just doesn't make sense to me, and gaps that don't make sense tend to close. The 997.1 runs from 2005 to 2008. It uses the normally aspirated 3.6-liter flat-six, 325 horsepower in the base Carrera, 355 horse in the S. It is a genuinely outstanding engine. Smooth, characterful, and in a manual car, it rewards exactly the kind of driving that a true Porsche owner looks for. You rev it, you work the shifter, and you use the whole car. The 997.2 brought direct injection, PDK availability, and some refinement improvements, all real upgrades. But in terms of the fundamental 911 experience, the feel of the car, the character of the chassis, the way it behaves on the road you love, the .1 is not meaningfully behind. Now I have to be honest with you here because this is part of the 997.1 conversation that I see people either rush past or avoid entirely, and I'm not going to do that. The M96 and M97 engines in the 997.1 have documented bore scoring issues. This is in addition to the real but also overhyped IMS bearing issues. It can be a real problem, and under certain conditions, low RPM lugging, extended cold starts, insufficient warm-up times, the cylinder walls can develop some scoring that leads to oil consumption and eventually engine damage. It's not a universal problem. As a matter of fact, in speaking with Blackstone Laboratories, they shared with me that the actual bore scoring risk is somewhere between 2 and 4%. Far below the huge scary numbers you hear on the threads online. But if you are going to have an honest discussion about the 997.1, you have to talk about it. While moving to the 997.2, the IMS issue goes away due to a new architecture of the motor. There are reports of bore scoring on the 997.2s as well, so this is a consideration for all 997s. Here's my honest take on how to handle it. You bore scope the engine before you buy. Full stop. A bore scope inspection is relatively inexpensive and it tells you exactly what you're buying. A clean bore scope on a well-maintained 997.1 changes the risk profile of that car significantly. You also look for service records showing regular oil changes and a history of the car being driven the way Porsche intended. Of course, full service history and records also help. A 997.1 with a clean bore scope and a full service history is one of the best driver cars in the used market at this price point. The bore scoring concern is real, but it's manageable with the right due diligence. Don't let it scare you off. Let it make you a more careful buyer. Of the 3 cars in this video, 997.1 is the one that I think moves fastest in terms of value. Here's my reasoning. The 997.2 has already appreciated meaningfully. Buyers who wanted a modern 911 at a reasonable price have already bid that market up. And the logical next step for those buyers is to look one generation back and discover that the .1 gives them most of what they wanted for significantly less money. The prestige of the .2s created a vacuum and the .1s are being drawn up. 997.1 prices that were in the low 30s 2 or 3 years ago are now consistently over $40,000 for clean examples, and for S's sometimes over $50,000. The gap to the .2 is still there, but it is narrowing. The buyers coming from the 996 rehabilitation story, the buyers priced out of the 997.2s, and the generational nostalgia wave I described earlier are all converging on this car at the same time. If you want a 997.1, the time is now. Not next year, now. The final car I want to share with you is the 981 Boxster in Cayman. It's the modern classic that no one has priced out yet. Now, for the sake of discussion here, I'm going to talk about my 981 Boxster. But everything I say here also relates to the Cayman as well. So, full disclosure, I own one of these. A 2014 981 Boxster base. And I'm going to try to be as objective as I can here, but I also think owning it gives me something no press car reviewer can give you, which is an honest, day-to-day, real-world story of what it's like to actually live with this car. The 981 Boxster is, in my opinion, one of the purest driving cars Porsche has made in the modern era. Mid-engine layout, naturally aspirated flat 6, manual gearbox available, open top. It's a car that does exactly what it was built to do: communicate with the driver, reward involvement, and make every road feel more interesting than it looked on the map. And right now, before the market has fully processed what this car actually is, you can still buy a very good one for a very reasonable number. The 981 ran from 2012 to 2016. It was the last generation of Boxster to use a naturally aspirated flat 6 before Porsche moved to the turbocharged flat 4 in the 718. That matters for a very specific reason. Not because turbocharged engines are bad. As a matter of fact, they're very good and 718s are great cars, but because a naturally aspirated engine in a mid-engine roadster revving freely to 7,000 RPM with the top down and the engine sitting inches behind your right shoulder is a very specific and increasingly rare experience. Porsche made a car that was genuinely special. They just didn't fully advertise how special it was at the time because doing so would have complicated their 911 sales story. We've talked about it on this channel before. What do you give up on the 981? A couple honest things. The interior, while good for its era, doesn't have the connectivity and tech of a newer car, of course, and if modern infotainment matters to you, it is an older system. You can upgrade it, it's fine. There's also the convertible top to think about. On high-mileage cars, the top mechanism and the rear window can be wear items. There can be some issues with crazing in the headlights, and sometimes, because of the glue used, the door cards can become warped and have to be replaced. Factor that into your inspection. Also, I'll say this honestly, the GTS is the pinnacle version of this car, but it remains very expensive. A clean 981 Boxster GTS is still asking $60,000, $65,000 or more, and that's real money, and it narrows the value argument significantly at that trim level. But here's where it gets really interesting. The base and the S models are where the value story lives right now. Clean 981 Boxster base, which is still a sensational driver's car. The same chassis, the same mid-engine balance, the same open-air experience is sitting at $35,000 to $40,000. And the S, with the larger 3.4-liter motor, is around $40,000 to $45,000 for a clean example. For a naturally aspirated, mid-engine manual Porsche Roadster with documented service history, that is still a remarkable number. And I don't think it stays there. As far as value, the 981 might be the slowest mover of the three cars in this video, and I want to be honest about that rather than oversell it. This is not a car I'd tell you to buy expecting dramatic short-term appreciation. It's a car I'd tell you to buy because you'll enjoy every mile you put on it. And when you eventually do sell it, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the value story will be significantly different from today. This is the type of car that I would feel you can go park your money in, enjoy the car, and get out of it without taking too big of a haircut. The 981 is entering its modern classic window. It's approaching the age where collectors start to pay attention, where condition becomes more important than mileage, and where the number of clean, well-maintained examples quietly starts to shrink, especially with manual transmissions. Buy a good one now, maintain it properly, drive it the way it was meant to be driven, and you are in a very reasonable position 5 or 10 years from now. So if you put a gun to my head and ask me to rank these three, here's where I land honestly. If I'm thinking about the fastest appreciation in the tightest window, the 997.1 manual, clean bore scope. That gap to the .2 is closing, and I think it closes faster than most people expect. That's the car I'd move on first if I was in the market today. If I'm thinking about the best overall value in terms of a genuine 911 at a price that still makes sense, a 996 Carrera, manual, maybe one of the early cars because they seem to be appreciating more quickly. It's a slower burn, but you do have to do your homework. But the floor is already in and the reputation is improving. And you're getting a real 911 driving experience, very analog for the money, that would make 993 owners genuinely nervous. And if I'm thinking about what I'd actually enjoy driving the most on any given Tuesday, which is honestly the question I think all of us should be asking, it's the 981 Boxster. Not because it's the fastest appreciator, but because every single time I take mine out, I come back having a better time than I expected. And that matters. The honest truth about all three of these cars is this: they're not investments, they're Porsches. The fact that smart buying strategy and genuine enjoyment point at the same cars right now, that's the rare intersection this video is really about. Whatever the economy is doing, whatever the market looks like when you're watching this, these fundamentals don't change. Find the car the market hasn't fully appreciated yet. Do your homework, buy the right example, drive it. If this helped, that's what 11 After 9 is here for. Hit subscribe and I'll keep showing up. I'm Derek. This is 11 After 9. Now get out there and drive.